Ready? You got your microphones down? Great question. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. We're going to start the meeting with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll start with the approval of the agenda. Paul, anything to add, change? Dan?
I have nothing.
Ryan?
No.
No? I've got two, in the Dropbox, we added that today. There was a resolution for donations to the library under the consent agenda, A2G, and that's $50 from Susan Byerly and $300 from the Card Club to the library for a $350 donation added to the consent agenda. And then we'll add J1 under the engineers report to discuss MnDOT LPP funding. With that, Tim, anything else you have?
I've just got one more, just informational item under M5, and I emailed it out to the council members as well, just to wrap up about the ice storm from the weekend, so, and that's in your Dropbox as well, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, entertain a motion to approve as changed. Thanks, Mel. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. On to the consent agenda with the added item. Any questions or comments for administration? Okay, entertain a motion to approve.
Entertain the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Visitors, I'll save my mayor's report to the end. On the old business, the first one is the cannabis ordinance. So that is in your packet under G1. Tim?
Sure, you know, we've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. We had the county's, copy in there that was left in the packet at last meeting. You had a chance to review there. Amy, I've talked to her just briefly on the phone tonight, and she's joining us tonight. Appreciate that. Basically letting us know that they, expecting the restrictions of the county to be the restrictions that are allowed. There are a couple categories where, the statute doesn't set that, so we might have some small alterations. But you know, you could take a look at that. If you have any questions on it, please let me know. Otherwise, we can talk about it. The feedback I had received from the council members after I'd asked last week was to not place a cap on the number at this time. So it's up to the council if you'd like to do a cap there, or if you'd like to, you know, those sort of changes, certainly up to you. Otherwise, you know, we are using the standard format that most of the cities in Minnesota are using for this registration process.
Okay. Comments? Questions? So you're saying that there doesn't have to be a cap? You can let
No.
future councils decide that as...
Yeah, based on the feedback I've received, there's no requirement that there's a cap. Dodge County, well, has a certain, I think, what did they say is a cap, 2? There's one item, whereas if the city decides to, at some point in the future, at this time, we haven't pursued it, do a municipal dispensary, then that would be, we'd have to figure out whether we want to count that against the cap. Is that right, Amy, or not, or how would that work?
Yeah, so the cities can, so the county has in the language that if a city of Casson has 2 dispensaries, that will count towards our 2, and we do not need to do any more. The city can defer that and count, but you would have to very specifically state that if the county has 1, you could count that as one of your cities, towards your city.
So
if you were to cap it at 2,
okay.
if there was one in Dodge Center, because of the way Dodge Center would possibly defer the county, it's kind of like a little triangle that...
So it's 2 for the county?
2 is where the county is at.
So if the city said no cap or anything, and then 5 years from now they said, we'd like to have a city dispensary, if there's already 2 somewhere in the county, they couldn't do it. Is that correct? Or the city could actually do one?
We could still do ours.
You
That's
can
my
still
understanding.
do...
The municipal one could do it, we just wouldn't have one for a...
Because you have your own ordinance. If you were to defer everything to the county,
Gotcha, okay.
then you would have to fall under the 2.
Okay, gotcha.
And I did look, you asked a question, Councilmember Ferris, about the areas, so I mean, we'll just go through that real quick. You know, cultivation, there are different types of permits, so that's something to keep in mind too. And, you know, I will say that a lot of this is still kind of a moving target from the state. You know, as you all know, like, the process has not gone particularly well at the state-led, you know, at the state government, in terms of how they've set it up, and they still don't really know. This lottery's been pushed back. They've kind of eliminated some of the social component anyway. Earlier this year, I took a look at it with Ian, we kind of looked at the zoning map and just, these are the areas where we think it would be feasible to do. The biggest thing obviously is avoiding the interaction with the children, schools and things like that, churches. The industrial districts would work by and large for that, and then some of the commercial districts would work for the retail component of it. Other than that, really, even like, we've got for cultivation, we've got a DH district with conditions for outdoor. We don't really have an agricultural district in Casson. And so there would definitely be some good discussion before we would look at any outdoor cultivation. I think within city limits, it would be unlikely that we would be able to meet that criteria. But it's technically possible, just something we would have to have a serious review of before we'd allow for anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, some of this is pretty much mandated by either Dodge County or by the state. So, I mean, if you've got any questions, I'm glad to take those. Otherwise, if you'd like to look for approval tonight, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm comfortable deferring it until January as well. At some point in time, we do want to have that, though, so if folks come and they're asking us, like, hey, I want to do it, obviously the state hasn't really authorized that yet, but at some point in time, I'm expecting the state next year to have these permits. So we want to just be prepared so that if people have questions, we can help them with that.
Okay. Thoughts?
It's kind of hard to have a good grasp on it since the state, I mean, I hate to say it, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to really know what once they figure out what they're doing, what the effect would be on any ordinance that we pass.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my perspective is, right now, I'm looking at, basically using this as a guiding document. If someone were to come to me, I'd say, hey, these are the zoning zones where we would guide you towards looking at a location. I mean, to me, like a retail, for example, that's probably the most straightforward. If somebody was gonna be selling these products, I'd say, these are the potential zones where you could be, you gotta avoid the school, you can't be by the daycare, you can't be close to certain things. And that would give them an idea of where they could build a shop, I guess, or something like that. I mean, other than that, like you said, a lot of the restrictions from the state really haven't been set in stone yet, and how that would even work. And even if we'll even have one applicant, I don't know. I think, Amy, when I spoke with you earlier, you said there was one person who had maybe talked about a mezzo business or something like that, maybe in rural Dodge County. But I have not received any inquiries yet from anyone. But the guidance from council was that we did want to leave it a little bit more open than some of the other areas are doing so.
And then, Mel, is it your understanding, or does anyone have any understanding, that if anybody were to open one and then a daycare were to open across the street, they're grandfathered in?
That's protected in the county ordinance anyway.
It is, okay.
Am I reading that right? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it says it's precluded if you're already operating under the rules that somebody
Okay.
moves, that's,
I missed it, thank you.
so, I guess, I'm only here for another, 20 minutes, so, I mean, I'm hoping 20 minutes, or 30 maybe. So, I mean, I have no problem approving this to give a framework for council going forward, but if you feel it's best to leave it open, but I don't know. I mean, as far as putting a hard cap on the number, 50 is not the answer, like Smart Alex said last time. I mean, I don't know. I'm torn on, are we gonna have any? I mean, anybody be interested in it? And then the question for the council going forward is, do you wanna have a city-sponsored dispensary and limit it to one? So, I mean, that's, again, kind of depends on what your philosophy is with city owning that business. Thoughts from those of you that will be here for a while?
We run the liquor store.
Oh, I know, but, and we can't do it out of the liquor store, so we'd have to have a second property, a second location.
Yeah.
Well,
The liquor store wouldn't be eligible because it's 490 feet from the residence at First and First. So, just
Well-
thinking about that, most of Main Street's within 500 feet of residential.
well, I think the city right now, in my opinion, doesn't need to be into it because there's so many unanswered questions and that if we get into it, we're just gonna have too many headaches to fight with in the beginning. That's just my opinion, but I think it's a ways away from being figured out on the state level, needless to say, our level. I don't have a problem approving this, so we have kind of a guidance, but I think it's gonna be a changing platform as we go. I mean, we're gonna have to be fluid with it. But at least we have guidance of where we can go.
And I think it's important to go ahead and get the guidance, because that's been part of the problem with our growth and development anyways, that people don't feel like they understand where things are permitted to be what.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do establish some form of zoning guidance,
And it'll save you from the headache of, in the future, if, say, things get together with the auction at the state, and people can come forward for it,
Yeah.
they know,
Yeah.
versus now, why can't we? You know, can you change that for us, you know, this is what it is, and move forward.
So I'm in favor of approving it tonight.
Paul, any opinions? The state requires us to have one, is that correct, to allow one?
Well, the state has a population number, where you're required to have a certain number per population. So, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily have to be in, Casson, but I think Dodge County is at max 2, I think you'd have to be willing to allow. It's like per 10,000 or per 12,500 people or something like that.
I think the city of Casson could say 0. We can't say that.
No, we can't say absolutely 0, no.
So you round up, so 12,500 is the minimum, so you
Yep.
can have one for 12,500. So the county has 2, because we're over 12,500, but we're under 25,000, so we have to go to...
If there were already 2 in the county, then we could say, okay,
Right.
Dodge County says you only have to have 2,
Okay.
and then we would...
You cannot, basically you can't ban it from your jurisdiction.
Okay. So, is there any interest in putting a cap on the number? Or just approving it with the guideline where it's at?
We can always put a cap later, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can always put the cap later.
that's why I'd say we approve it now as is, and then we can...
Yeah, it seems restrictive enough, I mean, as far as I think we can go without getting into legal issues. I'm curious to see if there's even gonna be any interest, but... Sure. And I agree, like, we should have something in place rather than nothing and be up in the air.
Right?
Fine with approving it today.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve it as presented.
Make the motion to approve.
Thanks, Ryan, do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Thanks for coming, Amy, appreciate it. On to the fee schedule. So that was brought back for this meeting from the last one, redlined with the changes. Questions for Tim on those changes, the recommendations?
Not a lot, most of
Not
the
a lot of
utility
ton of
rates
them.
that are being tweaked. As you know, the water rates are being tweaked based on the additional debt service considerations for the new tower project. Council is cognizant of that. Other than that, actually, the sewer rate is gonna be reduced. So, you know, one of the biggest things we get is about sewer, and so that rate is gonna be a marginal switch, reduced slightly, so that's a positive.
Are there any questions or comments for Tim on that?
I see a lot of things crossed off the ice arena. Are we losing some stuff? Is that due to the issues around the fair? What's,
The
No,
AAA
I
hockey
think-
team is no longer
I think
here.
more of those are related to things that are just no longer being offered, or haven't been offered for some time, and they're just gonna not be, they wanna take, Howie wanted to clean up some of those items where they maybe haven't offered it for a while, and he wanted to clean up the spreadsheet, I think.
Used to have that semi-pro team
Yeah,
that's not
that,
here
the
anymore.
AAA team is no longer here, and I believe Burn to Skate was taken over by Dodge County Youth Hockey, so they have events for it.
okay, so this is just kinda like obsolete
Novice
stuff,
hockey, I don't
not
think they
that
had the numbers for that anymore.
we're losing a bunch of business or something like that?
Cleaning up something that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
I like that, okay.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, entertain a motion to approve the fee schedule as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ryan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Tim, Administrator's Report?
I don't have a lot to report on tonight. Some things from the state. I've included in the packet there a budget. The state budget is looking like, to finish out this biennium, they'll have a surplus, about $600 million next year, but they're looking at a structural deficit for the 2026 through 28 budget cycle of several $billion. So either they need to make some cuts with some of their budget items, or they'll be looking at raising taxes. So other than that, fee schedule, forecast, budget, and I really appreciate the good in performance. We have a lot of members going to this Elected Leaders Institute. We actually have 4 out of 5 members going, so that's great. Really appreciate that. Mention this deed. As you know, the new rules for next year, January 26th, that new tax that starts for the state of Minnesota for that paid leave program. So that's something that we'll have to take a look at budgeting. Part of it would be paid by employees, part of it would be paid by the employer. So we'll have that, and then just have the guidance there. I've also included the breakdown on the fire hall. Year-to-date, there are still a number of closeout items that are being worked out. It always takes a little longer than you want, but right now, it looks pretty positive. I think just spent the last 3 months negotiating with the state of Minnesota for the sales tax rebate. We did have a check coming for $191,000 from the state, so we have that. That money will be going back into offsetting some of those costs into the debt service fund there. So at the end of the day, that's where we are right now. I'll try and get an updated one, by the end of the year here with a few more of those items closed out for you.
So in regards to that, looking at this thing, it says 30,000 at the bottom,
Mhm.
is that, we're projected to have that left over?
That's correct.
Okay, so out of the 300,000 contingency, we use 90% of it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other
And I
questions?
will say, I do expect that number to go up a little bit. So I'm hopeful that when some of these are all closed out, and I know I've talked to Beth from ICS, I expect that number to be more like 50,000 by the end of the project, but it's gonna be pretty close to what it was. A lot of those things did get used up in the contingency as part of it. There are a couple things that won't be closed out until next year. For example, the grass seeding, that company is under contract. They're gonna have to come back and do some remediation. They didn't wanna do it this year because they don't wanna spray for the weeds because it would've killed everything. So they'll come back, they'll be spraying in the spring, they'll be replanting grass seed again. There are a few other things like that. A couple of internal things with some of the dampeners and things like that that are still gonna be worked out, but, anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Anybody else got questions for Tim? Okay. We're gonna go to Engineers Report. We added J1 MnDOT LPP funding. Brandon?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just looking for some direction tonight on asking MnDOT for some more competitive funding. So local partnership program, what that is with MnDOT, that is locals, in this case, the city being a local, that's what MnDOT calls us. Local projects, improvements on their trunk highway that the locals are interested in. We use this funding for the roundabout of 16th Street. We got, I think it was $1.5 million on that project to build that roundabout. MnDOT just doesn't come in and build roundabouts necessarily. They're looking for locals to push that and go after this competitive funding, so they have a piece of their budget set aside for these projects. So, what staff, I think, is ultimately looking for some direction on is the reconstruction of 57 from 11th Street, which is the north end of our reconstruction project, to the south leg of our roundabout that we built a couple years ago. So on the north end of town, that does abut that Shooty property that we approved the residential subdivision on the west half, with the condition that they punch that road to the east half to connect to 57. MnDOT has told us that they're gonna require either the center turn lane, like we have configured to the south, match that configuration. Our turn and bypass lane, so I think it's gonna be a center turn lane, is going to be required as we build that road through there. We may be able to build the road through there and it comes back at a later project through the city or the state, but that's gonna be a requirement. So, there's some funding available, just released. So looking for some direction of council to move forward with it, and MnDOT staff did recommend us that we go after this money previously when we talked about the project. So it is competitive, so I can't guarantee we're going to get it, but I think we should go after it to try to get it done. The construction cost and construction engineering is paid by this program. I think the city's on the hook for the engineering to get it to buildable, and then they want us to build it as a city project, just like we did this roundabout project. So that's where we're at. There's some conversation with the developer, so if there's another cost, again, the engineering side, I think we can have that cost of the developer, because at the end of the day, this is pushing development, albeit, pretty big parcel and advantage to our community to have this road built and get that access open and have a commercial corridor through that area that's planned, is obviously beneficial as town grows. so we can have a conversation on what we do with that extra cost that we'll have, moving forward. So, again, direction tonight and moving forward, putting that application together, because it does take staff time. But I will be back, if we move forward tonight, at the January meeting with a resolution to formally apply for the funding. So, pause and see if you have any questions.
Questions for Brandon?
Yeah, so this funding would be for what project exactly? Basically taking that section of road that they just paved, 2 years ago, and it's not just a restripe? The road's not wide enough to do the center lane all the way to the
Correct. So,
roundabout?
good point, we asked that question. So, the center part of that has concrete, the 2 through lanes, and then the shoulders are just paved. So if we put a center turn lane there, we're gonna push that traffic out on the shoulders, out from the concrete that's buried into the asphalt.
The shoulders aren't
So we
designed
asked
for
if
it.
we could run the traffic over there, knowing that it probably won't hold up real well, and they said, no, we're gonna have to rebuild the entire corridor. So, they did pave it, that wasn't actually planned, because at the time, we said we don't have any interest in repaving that road, it's a MnDOT road, we don't have utilities in there. Development came along and said, well, maybe we need to look at a third lane through there, so that's where we're at. May have curb and gutter made out, I gotta work those details out on my end, so. We're also in conversation with trying to get MnDOT to do it as part of a separate paving project, but not sure we're gonna be successful, so whether they do it or we get this funding and do it ourselves, we're looking at ultimately having the state pay for it.
And like, is this, and like, how much are you requesting in the application for the project?
I think we previously penciled out like 1.2 million,
Okay,
and even if we get the 1.2, it probably won't be till, I think it's 27 or 28 construction, our fiscal year. So it'll still be some time.
that doesn't seem like it's really gonna help the current development then, is it?
Well, MnDOT has conditioned approval of that roadway, ultimately being connected to MnDOT. Whenever you get a MnDOT permit to build a new city street out to the trunk highway system, they can restrict that, not approve it, so you can approve it as conditions that the city and MnDOT are gonna get this figured out and build.
So
Turn lane.
if we have it on our schedule to do it, they will give the permit to make the road to connect it?
They would
in
potentially
advance?
give the permit, the way I understand it, they would give the permit today, with the understanding that the city and MnDOT are gonna figure this out. We're gonna apply for LPP moving forward until we get it, or they do it themselves.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're gonna hold up if we punch that road through, they may not hold it up, but that's a discussion we've had with MnDOT, but they haven't necessarily guaranteed it. But if we ask for the permit today, I think we may get it, with the idea that we're applying for LPP funding. And they're part of the voting group that's gonna approve the project, that's why I think it's a attractive project for us to spend the time to put the application together.
Yeah, would they be requiring us to run that center lane all the way basically to the roundabout? Or
Correct.
just to where we need it for 13th?
I think by the time we get if we did the turn and bypass lane system, I think you're gonna about be to the roundabout by the time you're done, so I think it's nice to project that.
Yeah, there's another road on the east side that
Correct, yep.
would be served by it too.
13th.
Correct, yep.
So, okay.
So southbound would actually probably be a left turn into 13th, and then,
And this is just a straight grant, it's not like a 50/50 match or anything?
so, engineering is a city cost, construction and construction engineering is an eligible cost. We can ask for 100% of construction and construction engineering. If we have engineering on the front end, we can talk about that with the developer.
Right, we could offload that onto the development
Potentially,
side.
that's the city discussion moving forward after we get the grants. And obviously, I'd put together engineering costs, and we can lay that out. We actually are meeting with the same developer tomorrow, Schramm, Shooty, to start talking about some of those things, so.
Okay.
Okay, good question. Anybody else, anything else?
Okay, so do you need a motion from us to
Sure, if you'd
proceed?
like.
Okay.
I'll entertain a motion to, proceed, have the engineer proceed with the MDOT LPP funding application.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Mel, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Correspondence, you added the ice storm
Yeah, I
report
emailed
from
that out to
Charlie?
you, just wanted to highlight, we did that ice storm last week, so, I mean, I've highlighted that for you, it's in Dropbox in your email. We had Mark out for about 5.5 hours, and the dump truck was doing sanding, Chris 3 hours, Ben 3.5 hours. Tony was there for an hour on sidewalks with salt, and Charlie was 2 hours. On the contractor truck sander, we had Steve out for 2 hours. We actually had 24 tons of salt, and then 13 tons of sand salt mix, so, I just want to put out the fact that we do try to keep up with it. Some weather events occur, and it isn't always going to be perfect right away, but we do try to get out there and do the best we can. So, when an ice storm like that, it's always difficult, but we encourage the public to take their time, and I know we've had questions about the roundabouts, obviously, it's another winter, we just gotta take our time, and our guys are out there and they're doing the best they can, so I appreciate all the positive feedback we had too from folks after that.
Yeah.
Good idea. I think they did fine.
It was a tough storm just the perfect conditions to make it hard on them.
Yep. All right, with that, my mayor's report, all I have to say tonight is thank you. It's been a great 8 years. Thanks, city staff, for everything to work with the last 8 years. It's been great. Our consultants with the engineering and attorneys, difficult to do this job without them, so, it's very much, and our city employees, I think you all do a great job for having 7,000 bosses that think they can do their job better than you. So I give a shout out to all the city employees and government employees, especially because I probably used to be one of those people, what are they doing, why are they doing it that way, but when you come and see exactly why and how, you have a little bit better appreciation for it. So I think our city employees do a fine job. Again, we got, rightfully so, we have 7,000 people that pay the bills and they expect a lot, so we have a pretty tough job to do. And thanks to Tim, been good working with you the last 5 years. You made it 5 years.
We haven't flooded yet.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, way to go, guys.
Right, too soon.
I said.
Too soon on the flood. And then thanks also to, I'd like to thank my scheduler who's in the audience tonight. She put up with a lot of crap for the last 8 years too. And then my office staff too, I'll give a shout out to them even though they're not here, but, a lot of grief being on Main Street and easily accessible with, folks just walking in and, not really their job. Phone calls, Julie at the front desk probably took the brunt of it, but she's really good by just saying, I really don't care, call City Hall, and after you get several phone calls, very respectfully, but after a while, she's got a job to do. But, thanks, and to the taxpayers of Casson, we have a great community, was on it for 8 years, and I appreciate it. So with that, thank you, and I'll move for adjournment.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? You better not be opposed. All right. Thanks, and have a great night.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.